Welcome to the Fish House Nation podcast presented by Catch Cover, your home for ice fishing news, tips, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Chris Larson.
Welcome to the Fish House Nation podcast. Today, our guest is Jeremy Smith from Lindner Media and Angling Edge. Jeremy, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks, Chris. I appreciate you having me.
Today, we wanted to talk to you about something that I feel isn't discussed too often, and that's really the best line for ice fishing. This is something that you're direct contact with the fish, but a lot of people just don't give it a lot of thought. Jeremy, what do you think about ice fishing line and kind of where it is in people's consciousness when we're thinking about gearing up for the season?
Yeah, so obviously line is a huge deal, and it's not only ice fishing; it's open water and talking to people throughout the year. It's one of the biggest questions we get asked. And my answer to it typically is, well, whatever you're most comfortable with. So in a situation, you might choose to use braid where I might like fluorocarbon and Lindner might like monofilament. Then we could all be successful in that. It really comes down to a personal preference. But I can kind of share with you some of the ideas that I have and why I make certain choices with line. And a lot of it is mono. I fish a lot of mono and some fluorocarbon ice fishing, and it's primarily because it's what I grew up with, it's what I'm used to, and it fits the bill for a lot of different situations.
Tell me a little bit more about mono. What is it that makes mono kind of your go-to on most of your rods?
Sure. So one thing is I do like the handling characteristics of it. I fish outside most of the time. We'll just use panfish as a starting example here. So what I really like about mono is that it has a little bit of memory to it. So for example, if I'm fishing bluegills with a really light jig, if a fish bites it, a lot of the talk is, is it an up bite? Do you see the fish bite on your rod tip? Do you see it bounce? Well, often you can just watch your line and see if your line moves. If your line straightens out or if it jumps, you know that you've got a bite on a really finicky fish. So your line and the memory in your line can essentially act as what a spring bobber does in many situations. So that's one of the biggest reasons I like it for fishing outside and getting those really light bites. And I feel like it manages or sheds ice really, really well outside.
So those are the reasons why you're using mono. When you're going to a braid or you're going to a fluoro, what is it that the mono's not giving you to make you want to switch to something else in those times you're using a different type of line?
Yeah, so when I'm fishing with braid, for example, a lot of times I'm using braid when I'm fishing, more rugged conditions where it's really cold. You might be fishing walleyes or trout or something like that outside where you just want to be able to rip the stuff off with your gloves. It might be getting tangled on something, that it's just a really durable, tough line, and you can still just pinch your mitts on it and strip the ice off of it, and you're not gonna do any damage to it. So I tend to use braid when it's I'm fishing bigger stuff out, and I'm dealing with a lot of really just tough conditions is when I typically tend to use braid.
Okay. So what pound test are you using when you're fishing panfish?
So I really, really like fishing 3 pounds. So I know a lot of guys would argue that, you need to have 1 pound or you need to have 2 pound line to get more bites. And I'm not saying that isn't true in many cases. However, I just find that the utility of it isn't necessarily there. So if I could maybe get a couple more sunnies to bite because I was using 1 pound and then up breaking off a nice bass, breaking off, getting bit off by pike, losing a big crappie and the transducer getting wrapped around. So I find that when you're fishing that light line, you're going to have a higher failure rate, especially if you start getting around some bigger fish. So stepping up to that 3 pound, I feel like is a really sweet spot. The line is tough. Yeah, I feel like you're still getting a ton of bites with it. If you do hook into a big bass, you're fishing for gills and you end up on some really big crappies, you're able to handle those fish a lot better, and you just have a lot less chance of failure, and you're not having to retie tiny little jigs when it's 20 below and the wind is blowing, right?
Right. That's another thing that I don't think people think about is, when we're tying jigs on in our living room, it's pretty easy to work with that light line, but when you get out in the cold and you have to take your gloves off and everything is white, so it's harder to see things. It definitely helps
Oh yeah.
a little bit bulkier line.
Yeah, and there's one line that in particular, a mono that I've come to fall in love with the past few years, and I started using it for jig and wrap fishing in open water, and then snap jigging, and that's Suffix Advanced Mono. So it's a mono that actually sinks, but it has incredibly low stretch. It's the lowest stretching mono that I know, and it comes in, and I think it's 4 pound all the way up to 25 pound or whatever it is. But the 6 pound Suffix Advanced Mono is like the craziest line I've ever seen. I'll use it in the summertime when I'll throw deep diving crankbaits on this line. I've got 40-pound flatheads on this line. I've caught giant muskies with this line. I've caught tons of walleyes. You name it, it's like this 6 pound you can't break. And it's what I use when I'm burbot fishing, which I really love burbot fishing. I'm using it for lake trout fishing. I'm using it for walleye fishing. It's a line with low stretch. It sinks, and it is tough as nails. And it's not, don't get this line and think, well, I don't trust the 6 pound. I'm going to go with 8 or 10. The 8 and 10 are not the same as the 6. There's something, I have no idea what it is, but there's something really magic about that 6.
So the 6 pound, that's your go-to. My next question is, what are you using for walleyes? So that's going to be your go-to for walleye fishing.
Yeah, I just use it for I just use it for any bigger fish applications. That is absolutely the thing I'm going with. So I really, really like that line a ton, and that's what I've been using, and it handles well in the cold.
Well, inline reels have definitely arrived on the scene. It seems like just about everybody is fishing inlines, especially for panfish. Does reel choice matter when it comes to choosing the best line to use?
Well, kind of back to what I had said earlier, one of my friends, Brian, had given me some great advice about fishing years back, and it's really stuck with me. He said, when I was telling him about some technique that I thought worked well, and he goes, hey, the only thing objective about fishing is the fish. And so if you think that you're going to have better success and you're not going to have the jig spinning and that type of thing with an in reel or an inline reel, then absolutely, that's the way to go. And you like that, that's great. I still fish with traditional spinning equipment for pretty much every situation I've got on the ice. It's what I like. I have fished with the inline reels. Maybe I just haven't had the right one, but I just didn't see a distinct advantage to having that. So I still fish with traditional spinning gear.
Very cool. One thing we haven't talked about much, I've mentioned it a few different times, but I haven't heard you say anything about is fluorocarbon so far. And I actually just watched the video that Lindner's produced last year at the St. Paul show, asked all the pros about their favorite lines, and many of them said fluorocarbon. So there's these microfluoros out now that are super narrow and supposedly invisible to the fish. What about fluorocarbon? Haven't heard you say anything about it yet. So is that something that you're not into yet? And if so, why?
No, I do fish. I do fish a ton of fluorocarbon throughout the year. It's obviously the main choice for a leader line. I do like the Invisalign ice fluorocarbon a lot. It has really it handles a lot like a mono. So the biggest issue that you'll have with fluorocarbon obviously is the extreme memory that it can have. So when you're ice fishing, you really, unless you're in a warm, comfortable house, you really want to look at the suppleness of that line. So if it's a really stiff fluorocarbon, it's not going to be a good choice for most ice fishing applications. And one thing I see people make a mistake of when they're spooling up spinning equipment with fluorocarbon is they'll over spool the reel. So if you put too much line on the reel, that's when you're going to start to have the big bird's nests or the big hoops coming off the line. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that spool about an 1/8 inch from the rim of it, from it being completely full, and you'll have a lot better handling characteristics with it. So fluorocarbon's a great choice, and if you can get a nice supple fluorocarbon, that it's the way to it's a great way to go.
We've been talking line that we're going to put on a reel, a rod that we're holding. What about line for rigging tip-ups and rattle reels in the house? How do you set up your tip-ups and rattle reels?
So I don't. I guess would be the best thing. I'm not a big pop-up guy or rattle reel. I like to have a stick in my hand and cut and walk. That's kind of my deal, and I've always felt that they slow me down. But it does produce a lot of fish. So, some guys like my friend Mike Hainer, he fishes a ton of Dacron still. And then there's another new line that Suffix has come out with. It's it basically has the feel of a fly line. So that's the biggest thing, right? Is just having messes show up on your, you've got a line that you take it off the spool, you throw it all over, and it gets all messed up. And it's called the V-coat rattle reel line. And it's a lot like a fly line. So you can pile this stuff up and it just doesn't get messy. So that's a really, from what I've seen, and I'm certainly no expert at it, that's been a really nice product to use as well, and like a 20-pound test.
Jeremy, is there something about ice fishing line that I haven't asked you about that you want to get out to our audience?
Well, I mean, I just think I really can't drive the point home enough that, if you're just, you're fishing mono or you're fishing braid or you're fishing fluorocarbon and you like it and you're catching fish with it and you're hearing everybody talk about, hey, this is really the only way to go, certainly give it a try. It's always fun to experiment and you might find advantages to it. But if it's working and you're comfortable with it, that's the best choice for you. It really is. So there are situations where, maybe braid isn't the best answer or mono isn't the best answer. But if it's working for you and you're comfortable with it, absolutely use that. That's the right choice.
Go with what you got. You guys are getting ready for ice season right now and kind of gearing up for videos. Tell us kind of what people can expect out of Lindner Media for ice season this year. What kind of cool things do you have going?
Yeah, so last year we launched a product called Angling Buzz Ice, and it was a real success. So we do 4 episodes that are long, usually 30 to 50 minutes in length, and we start launching those mid-October. We do another one mid-November, another one mid-December, and a final one in mid-January. And then throughout the ice period, we're dropping in 3 additional pieces of content. So if you look at Angling Buzz Ice, if you go to our website, check out Angling Buzz or our YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of content. It's been fun because we've got a chance to work with all the big boys that are super into ice fishing. We shot with them all last year. We'll be shooting with those guys as soon as we get hard water again, and we're getting the best content we can possibly get out on the ice and sharing that with people, and you're getting 3 shots of it a week. So it's been a fun project and it's been well received.
Awesome. If people want to watch that, see that, where can they find it?
YouTube is the best spot to look at a lot of it, but we've also got written content and more information on anglingbuzz.com. But if you just look on YouTube for Angling Buzz Ice, you'll see a ton of content up there as well.
Awesome. Jeremy Smith from Lindner Media, Angling Edge. Have a great season on the ice. Really appreciate you coming on, talking some line with us today.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Fish House Nation podcast presented by Catch Cover. For more ice fishing content, visit our blog at catchcover.com.